Good morning, Brita Wallace here, family and parent educator with Wallace Family Ministry. Welcome to my channel. Today we are on day 13 of the Love Dare challenge that we are going on the study or challenge, however you want to refer to it as. I like to say challenge. I'm all about challenges and practicing things in action so that we can change habits and patterns. So we always start with a verse, and today we're just going to hop right in. And our verse is Mark 3:25, which is if a house is divided against itself, the house will not be able to stand. Okay, so that's why, if you think about that verse, when you think about parents that are separating or divorcing, the house is not able to stand. It becomes divided, right? Kids aren't in one home anymore. They're being split up between two homes. There's two parents, so on and so forth. So we're going to fight in our marriages, in relationships. You're going to fight with your kids. You're going to get in arguments with family members, friends, get in disagreements. Everybody has these kinds of conflicts. It's really inevitable. And that's the first thing I want you to get, is that conflict in marriage is inevitable. It's never going to be perfect. We're never going to be able to avoid conflict. So a great marriage on Monday can start driving off a cliff, on Tuesday, if unbridled conflict takes over and neither of you have your foot on the brakes. Somebody has to say, okay, enough. Like we talked about yesterday, we talked about, valuing our spouse and valuing our marriage enough to let the other person win, right? So we need to make sure that we are putting the brakes on things, that if things really don't matter, if it doesn't have, we do need to reconcile things at times, and there's other things that we get in arguments about. I mean, a lot of times when we get in arguments in life with other people, it's for foolish, silly things, right? Somebody's in a bad mood, and then there are those tougher things that we argue about and don't see eye to eye on, and we do need those things reconciled. But somebody has to put on the brakes and say, even with those situations that need to be reconciled, there's a time and a place. If tempers are flaring, that's probably not the time and the place. Somebody has to say, that's definitely not the time or the place. Somebody has to say, I'm putting the brakes on this. We're not going to do this right now. We can revisit this topic when we're both calm and in a neutral place, right? So we want to make sure that we are putting on the brakes and being wise enough to recognize when that needs to happen and when to revisit later. Okay, so love reminds us that our marriage is too valuable to allow us to self-destruct, and that our relationship is more important than whatever we are fighting about. Okay, so we have to value our marriage. We have to value that we need to not self-destruct, that our marriage, our relationship, our partner is more important than whatever it is that we're fighting about, right? So love helps us to instill airbags and set up guardrails in our relationship. It protects our oneness, okay? So the next point I want you to get is the wisest way is to learn how to fight clean by establishing healthy rules of engagement. And when we do this, it leads to a much closer, more trusting, more intimate and connected partnership with our spouses. So how do we do this? We do this by creating we boundaries and me boundaries, okay? So we boundaries are rules you both agree on beforehand that apply during any fight or altercation, all right? And each of you has the right to gently but directly enforce these rules and boundaries. These boundaries I like better. But directly, each of you has the right to gently but directly enforce them if these rules are violated. And these could include, here's some examples that the authors give us. We will never mention divorce. We will not, that's number 1. Number 2, we will not bring up old, unrelated items from the past. That's number 2. Number 3, we will never fight in public or in front of our children. Number 4, we will call a timeout if the conflict escalates to a damaging level, right? So that's what we were talking about before, is learning when to put the brakes on. Number 5, we will never touch one another in a harmful way. Number 6, we will never go to bed angry with one another. Number 7, failure is not an option. Whatever it takes, we will work this out, right? So those are some examples of some we boundaries, and some me boundaries are rules you personally practice on your own. All right, here are some of the most effective examples. Number 1, I will listen before speaking. Everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. James 1:19. The one who listens first consistently has the advantage in a fight. You should always approach sensitive issues by respectfully asking questions rather than making assumptions or unleashing accusations. Number 2, I will deal with my own issues up front. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but you do not notice the log that's in your own eye? Matthew 7:3. If you quickly admit where you were wrong and apologize first, you disarm your spouse and neutralize the ammo they were using against you, while leading the way for them to deal with their mistakes as well. That's a wise decision. That's not always the easiest thing to do, right? So number 3, I will gently speak and keep my voice down. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Proverbs 15:1. People tend to mirror their enemy in a fight. The more intense you get, the more intense they get. The more humble and tender you become, the more humble and tender they become. Let how you speak be laced with love regardless of what you are saying. Fighting fair means changing your weapons. Wow, I like that, right? Disagreeing with dignity, building a bridge instead of burning one down. Love is not a fight, but it's always worth fighting for. Okay, so we want to make sure that we are fighting wisely, that we change our weapons, that we establish those boundaries. And those are just some examples of boundaries. They're really, really good examples. Of course, you can use them if you're like, hey, I really, really like them. You can refer back to the book. You can watch the video again and write them down if you want. But we want to make sure we're establishing these boundaries in our marriages, and when it comes to fighting and disagreeing and the conflict that we each have in our marriage, so that we can fight fair, so we can learn how to fight fair, right, by creating boundaries. Wallace Family Ministry is really big on boundaries. So today's dare is talk with your spouse about establishing healthy rules of engagement. If your mate is not ready for this, then write out your own personal rules to fight by. Resolve to abide by them when the next disagreements occurs. Okay, so that's a really good thing that we want to make sure that we're doing in our marriage, is creating these boundaries so that we can say, these are the things that, are going to be unacceptable. These are the things that we're not going to do. I'm sorry, it's really hot in here. And I feel like my glasses are like foggy and my hair is like sticking to my head, so I have to keep moving it a little. But we want to create these boundaries in our marriage, and boundaries are so healthy. And if you stick with Wallace Family Ministry, and after this study, and just watch some of the videos that I'll post and some of the teaching that I'll do, I'm sure at some point I will talk about boundaries and why they're important, and what they do for us in our health, because they really, really are so important, not just in our marriages, but in our lives, in any single relationship that we have. And it's really important that we establish those boundaries, which a lot of people do not have, especially in families. And it's not something that we really had growing up, and it's something that I have learned how to create for myself. It's not the easiest thing to do, especially when you're used to living a certain way, or other people in your life are used to living a certain way, and then you're like, no, I'm not gonna have this conversation or deal with this thing, whatever it is, and the other people don't really understand because they don't know what boundaries necessarily are, or they don't have them in their own lives. But it's important that we do. It is important that we learn how to create boundaries. And there's a big difference between creating boundaries and using them against people, and also because we have to speak the truth in love. Even if somebody's crossing our boundaries, we have to speak the truth in love to them and say, hey, listen, this is a boundary. This is a no-no zone for me. I'm not, this is something that I cannot put up with because it affects my health, whether it's emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, right? And we don't want to create walls either. So there is a fine line, and we will talk about that someday on this channel, I'm sure. But make sure that you're writing down those boundaries. If your spouse doesn't want to do it with you, like the book said, write them down on your own, and then make sure that you're committing to them, especially the next time conflict comes up. And if you want to roll with it and create boundaries other places too, where you're just like, hey, while I'm at it and I'm writing down these boundaries, you can discover where you need boundaries in other places in your life. If that's something you're just like, yes, this is exactly what I need, and areas that you really want to work on, discovering where those are. So, but make sure you do it in your marriage. That's where our focus is today. I'm just saying, if you're familiar with them and you want to take it a step further, then you can. So thanks for tuning in to my channel today. Please make sure that you like and share me with your friends, and that you subscribe to my channel. So I love you guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you tomorrow for day 14 of the Love Dare for marriages or relationships. Take care, and God bless.